So part 6 begins in, I believe, gioco stretto because of what happens in the very beginning. Now, in starting guard of my opponent is not specified, but it's probably not portiere alta. So if my opponent is in some guard, not portiere alta, and I'm in portiere larga myself, I'm right at the beginning to take 2 steps backward. So if I were in gioco stretto, that would make sense and put me in gioco largo. If I were already in gioco largo, that would put me completely out of the picture. So starting from gioco stretto in portiere larga, I take 1 step back going into guardia di consentire, which is this, with a step back and another step back getting into guardia di testa. So do that. 2 steps back, first your front foot, dominant foot, raising your pommel over your head, shielding yourself with your sword like this. 1 step. 1 more step, bringing this down into guardia di testa, and I will float about to the left and to the right in this position at gioco largo until I get my opponent to raise up into portiere alta here. And I think there's some sense to that. If he's also in guardia di testa and I'm floating around like this looks like I'm trying to hit his hands or something, right? He doesn't quite like that. He wants to get into portiere alta. So I think there is some definite purpose in my floating around in guardia di testa. So from here, he doesn't state anything specific. So when he says float about, he doesn't mean just to the right or just to the left with any sort of specific footwork. He doesn't say that. All I'm to do is from a measure probably like this. Take 2 steps back, 1, 2, I'm in guardia di testa, and I will float around. I'll move from one side to another until I see my opponent go into portiere alta, and then I will also. So that's the first part. So I'm floating around in guardia di testa, one side and the other, until I see him get into portiere alta, and I do too. There's one more thing I would say about it, is that I'm probably closing some measure. If I had taken 2 steps backward, 1, 2, as I'm floating around, I would say I'm also getting a little bit closer. When he drops into portiere alta, I do too, and push a crossed arm thrust, advancing. Now you notice how I advanced. I went in with my left foot, but I also gathered my right. So from that moment, he just got into portiere alta. I did too. I went from here into that, and we should be at this measure now. If I'm farther away than this next step would not make any sense. Crossed arm thrust. I take my left hand under my right arm, crossing my arms so that my true edge is against my opponent's false edge. Thrust toward the face with a big step of my left foot and gathering up my right foot. Got to push that away. False edge is typical. So once I get that, when I got here, cross the arms, and when I start to do that, you see I'm starting to lean forward into that and step here, go this way between the swords, grab that, hold it tight, and do what you want. As he says, wound your enemy at will with whatever you choose. This is locked in. That's not coming out. So from the other side. Now there is an alternate ending to this, which we will cover today. But let's get this first. From the moment of portiere alta, shift forward, crossing your arms, get your true edge strongly. You don't want to go in with this, with a false edge, you'll die. Crossed arm thrust strongly up here this way. Your sword is as high as your shoulder. Strengthen that, lean forward, take a step, and make sure you gather, because you got to advance again with the left foot, and you can't do that unless you've gathered. Release your left hand, reach between the swords, he says, go from above over their sword, take a step, reach around, wrap around, he says, with a turn of the hand, turn your hand, and you have that. Tight here. If they try to pull it, it shouldn't come out. It shouldn't cut you. you're safe, you're fine here no matter what they do. He can push, he can pull, it's not coming out, and this is going to start doing that. And really, again, anything I want, he says. I mean, I think you're a little bit limited, but you can throw some strikes. He does at close range throw a one-handed fendente, but I think the pommel's pretty good. Pommel strikes. If he tries to block that, first of all, that's kind of weird, but he might try to grab your wrist. That's a little stronger. Now, at that point, all I'm going to do is step back, and I've got to strike. But again, we don't want to go too far deep into the possibilities. There you go. From here, cross your arms, step your foot, gather that, let go with your left, reaching between here, take a step, grab that, and strike. Strike the hands. You can reach in here, wrap that, apply some pressure, twist, take it out. All sorts of things can happen. He is completely open. Make sure one thing. When you go to grab, that you're grabbing the lower quillin here and turning, as he says, make a turn of your hand. That means go palm up here. You don't want to be, this is not so good. You need to close that tightly, press it, squeeze it, and do not grab the upper quillin. You've got nothing with that. It's just not, you can't control that way. A crossed arm thrust, cross your arm, first thing you do, cross your arms, that's for your protection. You cannot be down here. You can't do this through the double A, you're gonna die. You have to control, through the forte. You can't do that through the forte with your double A. So make sure that when you're making the crossed arm thrust, even before my foot leaves the floor, I'm turning into here, getting this at the face, strongly threatening. It's got to be a credible threat. Okay, most questions are about the footwork though. Cross, big step, gathering, big step, gathering, hit, or whatever. Kick them. We kick. We throw. It's all open. You could be creative right there. This. Don't let this fold right away. Be strong here. I'm saying don't let him immediately, rigid. Keep it strong in there. If I were able to do that and push that right in the face, I would, and it would go in. I'm not taking that offline of the face. That is actually going at the face for real. He better push it aside because that's what lets me get in. So I have been mentioning about the punta incrociata, that is the crossed arm thrust. Do that, cross your arms first thing you do. See, right now in Portfolio Alta, he's pointing right at my face. When I make the crossed armed position, I've just offset his point out of my face. So even by doing this, he realizes the threat is now open. If I launch forward, I'm not going to run onto his point. My point will run onto his face, and he knows that. It's part of, I was saying, credible threat. Don't start this where both of our points are at both of our faces, and I'm going to start moving into that, and then hoping I'm going to turn my sword. No, don't, not that way.
Once I feel that movement, I'm turning my direction.
Yeah, I cannot start advancing onto that without first getting into the punta incrociata, the crossed arm position. I do that not just with my arms, but if you see my foot, I'll pivot out, and that enables me to launch forward as well, turning my feet in that way. So when I make the crossed armed position, turn that back, see the hips and shoulders turn because I pivoted on the back foot and then launch forward with that step. Also, don't bend your elbows there. That's a bad thing to do. If I get here and do that and bend my elbows, I could not go any farther than that. Keep your arms rigidly solid. That version of the play is what happens if they stay there while from Portfolio Alta I make a crossed arm thrust and they parry. Usually when Marozzo does describe a parry under these conditions from that guard against a thrust like that, it's a false edge parry. But what if they don't stay there? He has an alternative answer for that. And what would that look like? Well, if I came in with that. Instead of just staying there and using the false edge parry, he could step his front foot back and get into Codalunga Alta. That's a possibility. If that happens, here's what we do. First thing we do after this, they pass back and now they're in Codalunga Alta. And again, I gathered my feet. Throw a mandrito tondo, that is this, stepping here and bringing my feet close together here as well. He passes back once to save himself from this crossed arm thrust. And I go in with a mandrito tondo, stepping my right foot, compassing close behind, crossing that foot behind. He can pass back, parry that with his true edge and port for Alta. I can advance my front foot with another mandrito tondo, this time to the leg. He can draw his foot back and parry with his true edge. That's how we will proceed. Going again here with the second mandrito tondo with a step. As soon as I've done it, I back out into guardi di entrare and largo passo. And then I make a reverso trivelato. A reverso, first of all, if I were to make a reverso from here, and he's in that position, especially if when I had thrown for the leg, his point's down, I come back and go right away with his point, see, in a down position. You see that? If I had gone for his leg here, parried, I come back and I go right away in. You see how the sword went from low to high? In basically a Codalunga Alta with the right foot forward, you see? So see what I mean about that? And then a reverso. Now, a reverso trivelato is not defined specifically anywhere by Marozzo or anyone else. The only other person to use it is Mancellino in the Sword and Buckler. But it can be understood from the context. It always ends with the right foot in front. Now, normally, though, with a reverso, what foot do you normally step with a reverso, especially two-handed sword? Making a reverso, you normally pass your non-dominant foot forward in making the reverso. But that's not true in the case of a reverso trivelato because it's not a true reverso. The word trivelato means to drill. A reverso that drills, and your right foot will be in front. So you can see how that will take shape by looking at how I got into it. One step here, this, followed by this. Then I retract this foot back into guardi di entrare. From here it comes. Reverso, passing through guardi di consentire, stepping forward with the right foot. That reverso hits and drills in and hits the chest with the right foot and dominant foot in front. Then I simply pass back into guardi di entrare in largo passo. And that's it. That's a reverso trivelato. And it's fine that he parries it. If he parries a reverso with his true edge on the reverso line, that stops me. It's what he's expecting, especially if he sees this. Now, the trivelato, part of it, gets around his parry, partly in the fact that I've got my dominant foot forward. It looks like a reverso. Dominant foot coming forward, but the drilling gets in behind the parry. So I believe the parry is really a desirable thing on my part. I want him to. It doesn't stop me at all. Kind of means I got him to fall for it. So from the top, from this point of the thrust, one passing step. Here, back, throw, here, drill, retreat. As gallantly as possible. Practice. So you can practice this by yourself at home. Step. Step gather. Step strike. Back to guardi di entrare. Reverso trivelato. Returning to guardi di entrare in a wide stance. Marozzo said that the Reverso Trivellato ends in Guardia di Entrare. So, I mean, that tells you right there what he wants that to look like. That